Understands. The fastest way to make someone fall in love with you may have very little to do with chasing them, impressing them, or trying to become the perfect version of yourself. In fact, the harder you try to prove your value, the more you can sometimes create distance. Understands. The real shift begins when another person feels something far more powerful. This person understands a part of me that other people rarely see. That feeling can change an ordinary conversation into an experience that stays in someone's mind long after the conversation ends. But why does this happen? Understands. Why can one conversation feel completely forgettable while another creates an unexpected sense of closeness? Why can someone meet a person only a few times and still find themselves thinking about them days later? The answer reaches deeper than appearance, confidence, flirting, or clever words. Understands. It involves the psychology of emotional connection, self-disclosure, responsiveness, attraction, and the strange way people begin associating another person with feelings of safety, excitement, understanding, and personal growth. There is an important truth we need to establish before going deeper. You cannot force someone to fall in love with you. Understands. Love is not a switch that another person can secretly activate through the right psychological technique. Yet psychology has uncovered fascinating conditions that can make genuine attraction and emotional closeness more likely. Understands. One of the lesser-known discoveries is that people can become closer when they gradually reveal meaningful parts of themselves and receive genuine interest in return. Understands. A simple conversation can become emotionally significant when two people move beyond facts and begin sharing thoughts, fears, memories, values, dreams, and experiences that carry personal meaning. Something begins to change. The interaction becomes less about exchanging information and more about feeling understood. Understands. And this is where the real secret begins. The goal is not to convince someone that you are worthy of love. The goal is to create the kind of connection where both people can experience something real. Understands. You will learn why deep listening can be more powerful than trying to appear impressive, why carefully shared vulnerability can create unexpected closeness, and why emotional safety can quietly influence attraction. Understands. You will also discover why creating meaningful experiences together can cause someone to associate you with growth, excitement, and positive emotion. There is another fascinating part that people rarely discuss: the importance of reciprocity. When interest begins moving in both directions, attraction can take on a completely different quality. Understands. By the end of this video, you will understand why chasing harder can sometimes weaken attraction, why maintaining your own identity can make connection healthier, and why the person who becomes unforgettable is often the person who makes another human being feel genuinely seen. Understands. We will separate psychological reality from manipulation tactics and reveal what actually creates the foundation for deeper emotional connection. Stay until the end because the final principle may completely change how you think about making someone fall in love. Understands. It is less about controlling another person's emotions and far more about becoming someone with whom authentic connection can grow naturally. Understands. Welcome to Conscious Healing Hub, where we explore psychology, emotional patterns, relationships, healing, and the hidden forces shaping human connection. If you want to understand what happens beneath the surface of attraction and relationships, subscribe to the channel and join us for more deep psychological insights. Let's begin. Understands. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they are attracted to someone is trying too hard to impress them. It happens almost automatically. The moment feelings become involved, people can start editing themselves. They become more careful about every word, every message, every reaction, and every detail they reveal. Understands. They want to appear confident, successful, intelligent, attractive, mysterious, interesting, emotionally strong, and completely in control. They begin thinking about how they are being perceived instead of paying attention to what is actually happening between two people. The conversation becomes a performance. Understands. Instead of simply being present with another human being, they start presenting a carefully designed version of themselves. At first, this can feel like confidence. Deep down, however, it can come from fear. The fear is simple. If they see the real me, will they still like me? That question can quietly control the entire interaction. Understands. There is a fascinating problem with this approach. When you are constantly trying to prove your value, the other person has fewer opportunities to experience who you actually are. They may see the successful version of you. They may see the charming version. They may see the confident version. They may see someone who always knows exactly what to say. Understands. Yet emotional attraction grows through an experience between two people, and an experience requires presence. When someone feels that you are genuinely engaged with them, rather than performing for their approval, the interaction can become more relaxed and emotionally alive. You are no longer trying to win an evaluation. Understands. You are participating in a relationship that is unfolding in real time. This distinction matters because attraction is rarely based on a simple checklist. People often believe they need to possess a certain collection of qualities before someone can become attracted to them. understands. They think they need the perfect body, the perfect career, the perfect confidence, the perfect lifestyle, or the perfect personality. Yet real romantic attraction is far more complicated, understands. Research on romantic attraction has shown that attraction can depend on the individual, the person they are interacting with, and the unique relationship that develops between those two people. This means the same person can seem incredibly attractive to one individual and completely ordinary to another, understands. A quality that feels magnetic in one relationship may have little effect in another. The chemistry exists partly in the interaction itself. That is why trying to become universally impressive can be such an exhausting strategy. You are attempting to solve a problem that does not have a universal formula. Understands. You cannot become the perfect person for everyone. You can, however, become more present, authentic, curious, and emotionally available during an interaction. There's a subtle difference between wanting someone to admire you and wanting someone to know you. When admiration becomes the primary goal, you start monitoring their reactions. Understands. Did they laugh at that joke? Did they respond quickly? Did they seem impressed? Did they notice what I accomplished? Did they become more interested after I said that? Your attention moves away from the person in front of you and toward your own performance. Understands. This can make even a confident person appear tense because their mind is constantly measuring the outcome. There is another hidden problem. When you perform for approval, you may accidentally create an emotional distance that you were trying to eliminate. The other person may sense that something feels slightly controlled, understands. They may not be able to explain it. They may simply feel that they are getting a polished version of you rather than a genuine encounter. Real connection comes harder when both people are trying to manage impressions. One person is trying to look impressive. The other person may also be trying to look attractive, confident, or desirable. Understands. Suddenly, two human beings are sitting across from each other, wearing emotional costumes. Authenticity does not mean revealing everything immediately. It does not mean telling someone every insecurity you have during the first conversation. It does not mean behaving carelessly and calling it being yourself. Authenticity is much simpler. Understands. It means your words, behavior, and emotional presence are reasonably aligned with who you actually are. You can still be confident, you can still dress well, you can still communicate your achievements, you can still flirt and show interest. Understands. The difference is that you are doing these things because they express you rather than using them as evidence that you deserve to be chosen. Think about how different a conversation feels when you stop trying to produce a particular reaction. Understands. Instead of asking yourself, how can I make them impressed? You begin ask this person, so suddenly their words become more interesting. You notice the small details in their stories. You become curious about why they think the way they do. You listen instead of preparing your next impressive statement. Understands. You become more responsive to the actual person rather than the image of the person you hope will fall in love with you. This creates space for something much more valuable than approval, mutual discovery. And there is a psychological reason this shift can feel powerful. People want to feel that their presence matters. Understands. When someone listens carefully, responds thoughtfully, and remembers something meaningful from an earlier conversation, the interaction communicates something deeper than simple politeness. It communicates attention. Understands. It says in a quiet way, I am actually here with you. That experience can be far more memorable than someone listing their accomplishments or constantly trying to demonstrate how desirable they are. This is also why mystery is often misunderstood. Understands. Some people believe they need to hide their feelings, delay every response, or deliberately become unavailable to create attraction. That approach can create uncertainty, but uncertainty is not the same thing as intimacy. Genuine mystery comes from having depth. You have your own thoughts, interests, experiences, values, goals, and emotional world. Understands. You do not reveal every layer of yourself instantly because real people are discovered gradually. There is a natural unfolding. The other person becomes curious because there is more of you to know, not because you are deliberately withhold affection to manipulate their emotions. The same principle applies to confidence. Understands. Real confidence is less about convincing another person that you are valuable and more about being comfortable enough to let them decide for themselves. You do not need to force admiration. You do not need to prove that you are the most interesting person in the room. You do not need to compete with every person they have ever met. Understands. You can simply show up, communicate honestly, and allow the interaction to develop. That emotional freedom changes the energy of the conversation because you are no longer treating every moment as a test you must pass. This does not mean attraction becomes effortless or guaranteed. Understands. There will always be differences in chemistry, timing, preferences, circumstances, and emotional readiness. Someone can appreciate you deeply and still lack romantic feelings. That reality is important because healthy attraction requires freedom on both sides. Your role is not to engineer another person's emotions. Understands. Your role is to create the conditions in which two people can genuinely discover whether something meaningful exists between them. Once you stop trying so hard to impress someone, something else becomes possible. You become more interested in what is happening beneath the surface. You begin listening for the emotion behind the words. Understands. You notice what makes the other person light up, become thoughtful, laugh, or become unusually quiet. You stop treating conversation as a performance and start treating it as an exchange. Understands. And that leads directly to the first major psychological principle behind powerful connection. People are often drawn toward those who make them feel genuinely seen. There is a powerful difference between being noticed and being understood. Understands. Someone can notice your appearance, your job, your confidence, your sense of humor, and the things you say, yet still have no idea who you are beneath the surface. Emotional connection begins to deepen when a person feels that someone is paying attention to the parts of them that are harder to explain. Understands. This is why one of the most powerful things you can do when building attraction is surprisingly simple. Become genuinely curious about the other person's inner world. Understands. Instead of constantly thinking about what you should say next or how you can make yourself appear more impressive, start paying attention to what makes this particular person different. What do they care about? What experiences shape them? What do they value? What do they protect? What makes them excited? What makes them withdraw? Understands. These questions move a conversation away from basic information and toward emotional discovery. Most conversations begin on the surface. People ask, "Where are you from? What do you do? What do you like?" These questions are perfectly natural. They help two people learn basic facts about each other. Understands. The problem begins when the entire relationship stays there. You know where someone works, what music they listen to, what restaurants they like, and where they grew up, yet you still have no idea what matters to them emotionally. You know informations about them, but you do not know their inner world. Understands. Deeper connection begins when curiosity moves from facts toward meaning. Instead of simply asking what someone does, you become interested in why that work matters to them. Instead of asking what they like, you become curious about what those interests mean to them. Understands. Instead of asking where they have traveled, you may ask which experience changed the way they see life. This does not mean turning every conversation into an intense psychological interview. That can feel uncomfortable very quickly. Genuine curiosity has rhythm. Sometimes you talk about something completely ordinary. Sometimes you laugh. Understands. Sometimes you tell a story about yourself. Then a moment appears where the conversation naturally becomes deeper. When someone says, "I always wanted to do that," you can ask what stopped them. When they mention a difficult experience, you can ask what they learned from it. Understands. When they become passionate about a particular subject, you can stay with that energy instead of immediately changing the topic. The goal is not to collect personal information. The goal is to understand the person who's giving it to you. This is where listening becomes far more important than asking the perfect question. Understands. Someone can ask dozens of deep questions and still make another person feel completely unseen. Why? Because they are waiting for their turn to speak. They are thinking about the next question. They are searching for something clever to say. They are treating the conversation like a strategy. Real listening works differently. Understands. You hear the words, but you also pay attention to the emotion behind them. You notice when someone's voice changes while describing something important. You notice what they return to repeatedly. You notice which subjects make them more animated and which subjects make them suddenly quiet. Understands. You are listening for meaning rather than simply collecting sentences. Research on self-disclosure provides an important clue here. When people reveal personal information to each other, the interaction can influence how they perceive one another. Understands. Studies have found that people who receive another person's self-disclosure can develop greater liking and more positive impressions. This makes sense when you consider what disclosure communicates. When someone tells you something personal, they are giving you access to a part of themselves that is usually reserved for people they trust. Understands. A thoughtful response can communicate that their openness was received with care. The interaction becomes more emotionally rewarding because both people feel that something genuine is happening. There is also an important distinction between making someone feel seen and making them feel exposed. Understands. If you push someone into revealing personal information before they are ready, the experience can create discomfort rather than closeness. Emotional intimacy cannot be forced. You have to respect pace, boundaries, and context. When someone shares something meaningful, you do not immediately need to investigate every detail. Understands. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply to acknowledge what they said. "That sounds like it really changed you. I can understand why that stayed with you. It sounds like that mattered a lot to you." These responses can create space for the person to decide whether they want to continue. The same principle works in reverse. Understands. If you want someone to feel comfortable around you, you eventually have to allow them to know you too. Connection cannot survive as a one-sided investigation. You can ask thoughtful questions, but you also need to share your own experiences, opinions, hopes, mistakes, and values when the moment feels right. This creates reciprocity. Understands. One person opens a door and the other person opens one too. Gradually, the conversation becomes less like two strangers exchanging information and more like two people discovering how their inner worlds fit together. One of the most overlooked parts of feeling seen is remembering. Understands. Suppose someone casually tells you that they have an important meeting next week. Several days later, you ask how it went. That small question can carry surprising emotional weight. You remembered, you were listening. Their life did not disappear from your awareness the moment the conversation ended. Understands. You do not need grand romantic gestures to communicate interest. Sometimes attention expressed consistently small details creates a stronger impression than dramatic declarations. There is another reason this matters in attraction. Understands. When people feel understood, they can become more comfortable expressing parts of themselves that usually remain hidden. Their humor becomes more natural, their opinions become more honest, their vulnerability becomes less threatening. They may stop carefully managing every sentence because they sense that they are being received rather than judged. Understands. That emotional relaxation can change the entire quality of an interaction. The person is no longer performing for approval, they are simply being themselves. And this is where attraction can become deeper than physical interest. Physical attraction may capture attention, but emotional recognition can give that attention somewhere to go. Understands. Someone begins to associate you with the feeling of being understood. They may think about a conversation later because something you said helped them see themselves differently. They may remember the way you responded when they revealed something personal. They may remember that you noticed a detail other people ignored. Understands. These moments can become emotionally significant precisely because they were simple. The person who constantly talks about themselves may leave behind a collection of facts about their own life. The person who listens deeply can leave behind something different, an emotional experience. Understands. The other person may walk away thinking, I felt comfortable talking to them. I could be myself around them. They actually listened. They understood what I meant. Those feelings can become part of the memory of the interaction. People may forget your perfect words. Understands. They may forget the exact joke you told or the carefully prepared story you used to impress them. Yet they can remember how deeply they felt understood. They can remember the rare experience of speaking without feeling dismissed. They can remember someone noticing the emotion behind their words instead of rushing past it. Understands. And once someone feels safe enough to reveal more of themselves, another psychological process begins to unfold. Because emotional closeness often grows through something even more intimate than being heard, the gradual exchange of vulnerability. There is a moment in certain conversations when something changes. Understands. At first, two people are simply exchanging information. They are talking about work, family, interests, daily life, and ordinary experiences. Then one person says something a little more personal. Maybe they reveal a fear they rarely discuss. Maybe they admit a mistake that still bothers them. Understands. Maybe they describe an experience that changed the way they see relationships. Suddenly, the conversation feels different. The other person is no longer hearing only facts. They are being given access to something more private. Understands. This is where vulnerability can begin to create emotional closeness. But there is one principle that makes the process especially powerful: reciprocity. Reciprocity means that emotional openness begins moving in both directions. One person shares something meaningful, and the other responds with something genuine of their own. Understands. One person opens a door, and the other person does not simply stand outside asking questions, they open another door. This gradual exchange can make a conversation feel increasingly intimate because both people are participating in the process of being known. Understands. The interaction begins to communicate something subtle. I am willing to let you see something real about me, and I trust you enough to receive what you share with me. This process is very different from simply telling someone everything about yourself. Understands. A person who reveals their entire life story within the first conversation may believe they are creating instant intimacy, but emotional closeness does not work like downloading a file. Information alone does not create intimacy. Timing matters. Emotional safety matters. The quality of the response matters. Understands. A person's willingness to open up needs room to develop naturally. When vulnerability arrives at a pace that both people can handle, the experience can feel meaningful rather than overwhelming. Understands. Research on self-disclosure has found that reciprocal, turn-taking disclosure can increase liking, closeness, perceived similarity, enjoyment, and attraction during initial interactions. That finding becomes especially interesting when you consider what happens psychologically during a personal conversation. Understands. When someone shares something meaningful and receives genuine openness in return, they may begin to feel that the connection is becoming mutual. They are no longer simply telling their story to someone who is observing from a distance. They are participating in an exchange where both people are gradually revealing themselves. Understands. Think about the difference between these two interactions. In the first, one person keeps asking personal questions while revealing almost nothing about themselves. The other person may eventually feel exposed, studied, or even evaluated. In the second, someone asks a thoughtful question and then responds to the answer by sharing a related experience. Understands. The conversation becomes balanced. One person says, I struggled with that for years. The other might respond, I understand that. I went through something similar, although mine happened in a different way. Now, the first person has something to respond to. The conversation has movement. It has emotional rhythm. Neither person is being interrogated. Understands. Both are participating. This is why the quality of the response can be just as important as the disclosure itself. Imagine someone tells you about a painful disappointment, and you immediately change the subject because you feel uncomfortable. The person may learn that openness around you is unsafe. Understands. Now imagine they share the same experience and you respond with patience. You do not rush to fix them. You do not turn their pain into a competition. You simply listen and acknowledge what they trusted you enough to share. That response can communicate emotional maturity. It tells them that their vulnerability does not automatically create judgment. Understands. There is also a powerful element of perceived similarity. When people discover that someone else has experienced something emotionally familiar, they can feel less alone. The similarity does not need to be exact. You may have lived completely different lives while still understanding the emotional experience underneath someone's story. Understands. Perhaps they felt rejected. You have experienced rejection. Perhaps they struggled with feeling misunderstood. You know that feeling. Perhaps they once made a decision they regret. You have made mistakes too. These points of emotional recognition can create a bridge between two very different people. Understands. But vulnerability becomes unhealthy when it is used as a strategy rather than an expression of truth. This distinction matters because relationship advice often turns psychological principles into manipulation tactics. Understands. Someone might hear that vulnerability creates closeness and decide to manufacture a dramatic confession simply to make another person emotionally attached. That is completely different from genuine openness. A fabricated story may create temporary intensity, but it cannot create authentic trust. The same applies to trauma. Understands. You should never invent painful experiences because you believe another person's sympathy will make them fall in love with you. You should never exaggerate suffering to create emotional dependence. You should never reveal something deeply personal simply because you believe it will force another person to reveal something equally personal. Understands. Healthy vulnerability gives the other person freedom. They can respond, share, remain quiet, or change the subject. Their boundaries remain respected. There is another danger that deserves attention. When someone gives you access to their vulnerable side, they are trusting you with information that could potentially hurt them. Understands. Using those secrets later during an argument destroys the very safety that allowed the connection to develop. A person's vulnerability should never become ammunition. If someone tells you something painful about their past, you do not gain power over them. You gain responsibility. Real vulnerability also includes the ability to admit uncertainty. Understands. You do not always need to appear completely confident. You can say that something affected you. You can acknowledge that you made a mistake. You can admit that you are still learning. You can share a genuine hope or fear without turning it into a performance. Understands. These moments can make a person feel more human because perfection creates distance while appropriate openness can create recognition. The most powerful conversations often develop in layers. One person shares something small. The other responds. Sincere trust increases. A deeper story emerges. Another layer is revealed. Understands. The other person responds with their own experience. Time, the conversation moves from facts to feelings, from feelings to meaning, and from meaning toward genuine understanding. There is no need to rush the process. The emotional depth comes from allowing each layer to appear at the right moment. Understands. And something subtle can happen when this exchange becomes natural. Two people may begin associating each other with a rare feeling. I can actually be myself here. That feeling can become powerful because people spend much of their lives managing how they are perceived. They hide certain fears. They soften certain opinions. Understands. They avoid discussing certain memories. They protect parts of themselves. When someone creates a space where those defenses can gradually relax, the interaction can begin to feel different from ordinary social contact. That is why reciprocal vulnerability is so much more than simply sharing secrets. It is a gradual process of mutual recognition. Understands. You reveal something real, they reveal something real, and both people discover that they can be accepted without having to perform perfection. The connection becomes deeper because each person is seeing more of the human being behind the surface. Understands. Once emotional openness begins to feel safe, another powerful element starts shaping attraction. The experience of being fully present with someone who makes you feel that your thoughts and feelings actually matter. Understands. There is something increasingly rare in human relationships, and it has very little to do with money, appearance, status, or charm. It is attention, real attention. Understands. The kind where someone feels that for a few moments they are not competing with a phone, a notification, a television, another conversation, or 1,000 thoughts running through your mind. They have your presence. In a world where people are constantly distracted, this can become surprisingly powerful. Understands. Someone may forget the exact words you used, but they can remember how it felt to speak to someone completely there. There is a major difference between hearing someone and actually listening to them. Hearing is automatic. Sound reaches your ears, and you recognize the words. Listening requires participation. Understands. It means you are trying to understand what the other person is communicating, including the emotions and meaning beneath the words. Someone might say, "Work has been exhausting lately." Hearing the sentence means recognizing the information. Listening means becoming curious about what is making work exhausting. Maybe they feel unappreciated. Understands. Maybe they are afraid of failing. Maybe they have been carrying responsibilities that nobody else notices. The sentence is only the surface. The emotional story is underneath it. This is where genuine curiosity becomes important. When someone is speaking, resist the urge to immediately prepare your response. Understands. You do not have to search for the perfect story that will make you sound interesting. You do not need to mentally rehearse your next joke. You do not need to compare their experience with your own before they have finished explaining theirs. Give their words enough space to exist. Let them finish a thought. Notice the pauses, their stands. Notice when their energy changes. Notice the subjects that make their face become more expressive or their voice become quieter. These details can tell you far more than the basic information contained in their sentences. A person who feels listened to may gradually become more comfortable revealing themselves. Understands. They may begin with something ordinary and then move towards something meaningful because your response shows that you are actually engaged. Perhaps they mention a hobby they loved as a child. Instead of moving immediately to another subject, you ask what made it special. Perhaps they tell you about a difficult decision. Understands. You ask what ultimately helped them make it. Perhaps they casually mention that they have always wanted to travel somewhere. Weeks later, you remember the place and ask whether they still want to go. That small act of remembering can communicate something surprisingly deep. Understands. It says, without needing to say it directly, "You mattered enough for me to remember." That message can carry emotional weight because feeling remembered is different from simply being heard. When someone remembers a small detail about you, it suggests that your words did not disappear the moment the conversation ended. Understands. You occupied a little space in their attention. They notice something about you and move forward. It does not require an extravagant gesture. Sometimes it is simply remembering the name of someone's favorite book, asking about an important event they mentioned, or recalling the story behind something they care about. Understands. There is also a difference between attention and excessive intensity. Giving someone your full attention does not mean staring at them constantly or turning every interaction into a profound emotional conversation. Healthy attention has a natural rhythm. Sometimes you laugh. Sometimes you talk about ordinary things. Sometimes you become serious. Understands. Sometimes there is silence. The important part is that when the person is communicating something meaningful, you are actually available to receive it. Your attention follows the person rather than forcing every conversation into a particular emotional direction. Understands. This becomes especially important in romantic attraction because people often focus so heavily on being interesting that they forget to be interested. They want to tell the best stories. They want to demonstrate confidence. They want to show their accomplishments. They want to make the other person laugh. Understands. All of these things can have their place, but attraction is also shaped by how two people experience each other. If the other person feels that they have to compete for your attention, the interaction can feel emotionally empty even if the conversation is entertaining. Being deeply listened to can create a different experience. Understands. The person begins to feel that their thoughts have somewhere to land. They do not have to fight to be understood. They do not have to repeat themselves constantly. They do not have to simplify every feeling because you are impatient with complexity. They can take their time. They can explain. They can change their mind. Understands. They can tell a story that does not have a perfect ending. This kind of attention can create emotional safety because the person senses that they are being received rather than evaluated. Understands. There is another subtle quality of good listening that can make a person feel deeply understood, responding to the emotion rather than only responding to the information. Suppose someone tells you that they received an important opportunity, but their voice sounds uncertain. A surface response might focus entirely on the opportunity. Understands. A deeper response might recognize the mixed emotion and say, "You sound excited but also a little nervous about what it could mean." That observation can make someone pause because you notice something they may not have directly explained. Of course, this should never become mind reading. Understands. You are not claiming to know exactly what another person feels. You are simply paying enough attention to ask or reflect thoughtfully. It sounds like that was difficult for you. Am I understanding that correctly? This gives the other person the freedom to correct you. Understands. Good listening is not about proving that you understand someone better than they understand themselves. It is about creating enough space for them to explain themselves fully. And there is something deeply human about being able to finish a conversation and feel lighter because someone genuinely listened. Understands. You may have entered the interaction carrying thoughts that were difficult to organize. By the end, you may feel clearer simply because another person gave those thoughts their attention. The listener did not solve the problem, they did not need to. Their presence itself became valuable. Understands. This is why full attention can become one of the strongest forms of emotional generosity. You are giving someone something that cannot be faked for long. You are giving them your mental presence. You are saying through your behavior that their words deserve room, their experiences deserve consideration, and their inner world is worth discovering. Understands. In a relationship, that kind of attention can gradually become associated with comfort, trust, emotional closeness. And once someone begins to associate your presence with the feeling of being understood, something else can happen.
Conversations become easier.
Silence becomes less uncomfortable. Personal stories begin appearing naturally. Understands. Small details become meaningful. The person may begin looking forward to speaking with you because they know they will not simply be another voice competing for attention. They will be heard. They will be remembered. They will be met with genuine curiosity. Understands. From that foundation, emotional connection can begin moving beyond conversation and into something even more powerful. Shared experiences that give the relationship its own emotional world. There comes a point where words alone are no longer enough to explain why two people feel connected. Understands. You can have wonderful conversations with someone and still feel that something is missing. Then there are other connections where even ordinary moments seem to carry more energy. You laugh together, you discover something new. You become curious about the world around you. You experience something unexpected. Understands. You face a small challenge together and somehow feel closer afterward. These moments create something that a conversation by itself cannot always create, a shared emotional history. People do not connect only through the things they say to each other. They also connect through what they experience together. Understands. This is where the psychology of self-expansion becomes especially interesting. Researchers Arthur and Elaine Aron proposed the self-expansion model, which suggests that people can experience romantic relationships as opportunities to expand their sense of self. Understands. In simple terms, another person can become associated with new experiences, new perspectives, new abilities, and new parts of life that were previously outside your ordinary world. A relationship can introduce you to things you would have experienced differently, or perhaps never experienced at all on your own. Understands. The person gradually becomes connected with the feeling that your world has become larger. Think about what happens when someone introduces you to a new idea that completely changes the way you think. Perhaps you had never considered a particular perspective before. They explain it in a way that makes you curious. You start researching it. Understands. You begin looking at an old problem differently. You discover something about yourself in the process. The person who introduced that idea can become connected to that experience in your memory. Later, when you think about that new perspective, you may also remember the conversation that opened the door. Understands. The emotional significance comes from the experience of growth, not simply from the words that were spoken. This can happen through very simple experiences. Two people discover a new restaurant. They get lost while trying to find a place. They laugh about something unexpected. They learn something together. Understands. They try an activity that neither person has experienced before. They have a conversation that continues long after they expected it to. They face a small challenge and discover that they work well together. None of these moments has to be dramatic. Their importance comes from the emotional meaning attached to them. Understands. Over time, those experiences can become part of the unique story that belongs to the two people. There is a reason laughter can become especially powerful in this process. When two people laugh together, they are sharing an emotional state at the same time. They are responding to the same moment. That creates a sense of synchronization. Understands. The same thing can happen through curiosity. When two people become excited about discovering something together, their attention moves toward a shared experience. Instead of simply learning about each other, they are creating something that exists between them. This is also why shared challenges can sometimes create surprising closeness. Understands. A challenge does not have to involve anything extreme. It can be something as simple as learning a difficult skill, solving a problem, navigating an unfamiliar situation, or working toward a shared goal. When two people handle something together, they gain information about each other that ordinary conversation may never reveal. Understands. You see how they respond under pressure. You see how they communicate. You see whether they encourage you or become dismissive. You discover qualities that are difficult to describe through words alone. The experience can also change the way you see yourself. Understands. Perhaps you always believed you were shy, and being around this person encourages you to become more expressive. Perhaps you were afraid to try something new, and their enthusiasm gives you enough to take the first step. Perhaps they challenge an assumption you have carried for years, and suddenly you begin questioning it. Stands. The person becomes associated with movement. You feel that something inside you is developing. This is one of the deeper reasons attraction can become emotionally powerful. Sometimes we become drawn toward people because of who we are when we are around them. Understands. The question is no longer simply, what do I think about this person? It becomes, who am I becoming when I am with this person? That second question can reveal something much deeper. A person may become emotionally significant because their presence is connected with confidence, curiosity, courage, creativity, or a renewed sense of possibility. Understands. Of course, this does not mean you should deliberately manufacture exciting experiences as a psychological trick. The goal is not to create emotional highs so that someone becomes dependent on you. Healthy connection grows through genuine experiences that both people enjoy and choose freely. Understands. If every activity is carefully designed to produce a particular emotional reaction, the relationship can quickly become artificial. The experience should matter because it is meaningful, enjoyable, or valuable in its own right. There is also something important about variety. Understands. When every interaction follows exactly the same pattern, people may learn about each other without creating a rich emotional history. The relationship can become repetitive. Shared experiences give the connection texture. One conversation may be serious, another may be playful. One moment may involve discovering something new. Understands. Another may involve simply sitting together and talking about life. These different emotional experiences become separate threads that gradually form a larger story. Understands. Over time, memories begin to accumulate. A certain song reminds someone of a conversation. A particular place brings back laughter. A subject they once discussed becomes relevant again months later. An inside joke develops. A shared experience becomes a reference point that only the two of them fully understands. These small pieces of shared history can make a relationship feel unique because the connection now has its own emotional language. And this is where the self-expansion idea becomes especially powerful. A person can become connected with the discovery of a new part of yourself. Maybe you became more adventurous. Understands. Maybe you learned to communicate more honestly. Maybe you started pursuing something you had abandoned. Maybe you became more comfortable expressing emotions. The other person did not necessarily create those changes, but their presence became part of the period in which those changes happened. That association can carry emotional significance. Understands. This is why trying to make someone fall in love through constant talking can miss an important part of human connection. Words allow people to understand each other, but experiences allow them to discover each other. Conversation can tell you that someone is courageous. A shared challenge can let you experience their courage. Understands. Someone can tell you that they love exploring new places. Experiencing something unfamiliar together allows you to see their curiosity in action. Someone can tell you that they care deeply about people. Watching how they treat someone who needs help can reveal something that words alone could never communicate. Understands. People can become emotionally significant when they become connected to a better version of themselves. That does not mean you need to become someone's entire world. It means that a healthy relationship can become one place where growth, discovery, playfulness, and emotional expansion naturally occur. Understands. When someone begins to associate your presence with meaningful experiences and personal growth, the connection can carry a depth that goes far beyond physical attraction. And as that connection grows, another question becomes important. How do you create enough space for attraction to develop without turning closeness into dependence? Understands. There is a major difference between being emotionally available and becoming completely available. Healthy emotional availability means you are willing to communicate, listen, show affection, and make space for someone in your life. Complete availability can mean something very different. Understands. It can mean abandoning your routines, changing your priorities, constantly checking your phone, canceling plans whenever they become available, and making another person the center of your emotional world. At first, this can feel like devotion. You may believe that giving someone unlimited access proves how much you care. Understands. Yet attraction and emotional connection can become complicated when one person slowly disappears inside the relationship. This is where relationship advice often becomes confused. You may hear people say that the secret to attraction is becoming difficult to reach. Understands. They suggest waiting hours before replying, deliberately ignoring a few days, acting cold, or creating jealousy so the other person becomes afraid of losing you. These tactics can create uncertainty, but uncertainty is not the same thing as love. Understands. Making someone anxious about your availability is not the same as creating genuine attraction. Healthy connection does not require emotional games. There is a much healthier principle behind having your own space. Keep living your life. Continue doing the things that gave your life meaning before this person appeared. Maintain friendships, stands. Follow your interests, work toward your goals, take care of your responsibilities, make time for yourself. If you enjoy reading, keep reading. If you enjoy exercise, continue exercising. If you have ambitions, keep pursuing them. If you have people who matter to you, continue investing in those relationships. Stands. A romantic connection should become part of your life rather than replacing your entire life. This matters because identity plays an important role in emotional health. When someone becomes the only source of excitement, validation, comfort, and purpose, the relationship can begin carrying a weight that no person can realistically support. Stands. Every delayed message feels significant. Every canceled plan feels like rejection. You begin monitoring the relationship because too much of your emotional stability depends on what the other person does next. Instead of enjoying the connection, you become preoccupied with protecting it. Stands. There is a subtle psychological shift that happens here. In the beginning, you may ask, do I enjoy being around this person? Later, if you have abandoned too much of yourself, the question can become, do they still want me? Your attention moves from mutual discovery toward approval seeking. You begin measuring your worth through their behavior. Stands. Their attention becomes emotional currency. When they give it, you feel valuable. When they pull back, you feel uncertain about yourself. That is very different from healthy attraction. Maintaining your own life creates a different emotional environment. Stands. You can care deeply about someone while still having somewhere to go, something to pursue, and people to see. You can miss them without feeling empty. You can enjoy their attention without needing it every moment. You can look forward to seeing them without abandoning everything else that matters. Stands. This creates a form of emotional stability where closeness does not require self-erasure. Boundaries are an important part of this. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not a secret test designed to see whether someone will chase you. A boundary simply communicates what works for you and what does not. You can say that you are busy and will talk later. Stands. You can say that you need time alone. You can decline something that makes you uncomfortable. You can protect your schedule. You can decide that certain behavior is unacceptable. These actions do not make you less loving. They make the relationship more honest. Stands. There is also a difference between responding naturally and deliberately controlling your availability. Suppose you are genuinely busy when someone messages you. You respond when you have time. There is nothing wrong with that. Stands. But suppose you see the message immediately and deliberately wait 6 hours because you believe the delay will make them want you more. Now the interaction has become a strategy. The difference is intention. One behavior comes from having a life. The other comes from trying to manipulate another person's emotional response. Stands. The same principle applies to physical and emotional space. Healthy relationships contain both connection and individuality. Two people can spend meaningful time together while still having separate interests and experiences. They can enjoy closeness without demanding constant access. Stands. They can share their thoughts without expecting the other person to solve every emotional problem. They can love each other while remaining distinct individuals. This can actually make the relationship richer. When you continue living your own life, you have experiences to bring back into the relationship. You have new ideas, new stories, stands, new discoveries, new challenges. You remain a person who is growing. Instead of every conversation revolving around the relationship, you can talk about what you are learning, what you are experiencing, what you are working toward, and what has inspired you recently. Stands. Your individuality gives the relationship more depth because you are bringing two lives together rather than creating one life and deleting the other. There is another important reason to protect your identity. Stands. People are naturally drawn toward authenticity, but authenticity becomes difficult when you are constantly adjusting yourself to please someone. You may start changing your opinions because they disagree. You may hide interests because you think they will find them boring. You may stop seeing friends because you want to be available every evening. Stands. You may accept behavior that makes you uncomfortable because you are afraid that setting a boundary will cause the person to leave. Slowly, the version of you they are connecting with becomes less authentic. Stands. That creates a painful paradox. You may believe you are becoming more lovable by changing yourself, but you can end up creating a relationship in which you are loved for a version of yourself that does not actually feel like you. Real intimacy requires the other person to have the opportunity to know the real individual behind the performance. Stands. Closeness without losing yourself is therefore one of the healthiest forms of attraction. You can be affectionate without becoming dependent. You can be responsive without being constantly available. You can make someone a priority without making them your entire identity. You can miss them without chasing them. Understands. You can give them space without creating artificial distance. You can care deeply while still respecting your own needs. And something important happens when both people live this way. The relationship becomes a choice rather than an emotional requirement. Understands. Two people are together because they genuinely want to share their lives, not because either person has become incapable of feeling whole alone. There is room for affection, desire, curiosity, and growth without constant fear of losing the connection. Understands. And once that balance exists, one final element becomes especially revealing. Because attraction becomes much clearer when you stop measuring how much you give and start paying attention to whether the other person is giving something back. Understands. There is a moment in attraction when you need to stop asking how much more you can give and start paying attention to what is actually happening between you and the other person. This is where reciprocity becomes important. Attraction can feel exciting enough to make you overlook the simplest question. Is the interest moving in both directions? Understands. You may be fascinated by someone. You may want to talk to them constantly. You may enjoy learning about them and creating opportunities to spend time together. Yet genuine connection cannot be built through one person's effort forever. At some point, the other person has to participate. Understands. Reciprocity does not mean that both people must behave in exactly the same way. Human beings have different personalities, communication styles, schedules, and comfort levels. One person may be more expressive while the other is quieter. One may initiate conversations more often while the other shows interest through actions. Understands. The important thing is the overall pattern. Are you consistently moving toward them while they consistently remain passive? Are you always asking the questions while they rarely show curiosity about your life? Are you constantly making plans while they simply accept whatever you offer? Understands. These patterns can tell you something important about the emotional balance of the connection. When attraction is developing, curiosity often becomes mutual. They begin asking about you because they genuinely want to know more. They remember something you mentioned several days earlier. They bring up a story you told them. Understands. They ask how an important event went. They notice when something seems different about you. These details matter because attention requires effort. When someone is emotionally engaged, they are usually doing more than simply responding to whatever you initiate. They are participating in the relationship's movement. Understands. Think about the difference between someone answering your questions and someone becoming curious about you. A person can respond politely to everything you ask while remaining emotionally distant. You might ask about their childhood, their goals, their interests, and their fears, and they may happily answer. Understands. Yet they never ask anything meaningful about you. The conversation can feel deep because you are discussing personal subjects, but the intimacy is actually one-sided. You know more and more about them while they remain relatively unknown to you. That imbalance is easy to miss when you are emotionally invested. Understands. Reciprocity can appear through very small behaviors. They may send you something because it reminded them of you. They may suggest a place they want to visit together. They may initiate a conversation about something you discussed before. They may make an effort to accommodate your schedule. Understands. They may notice your interests and bring them into the conversation. They may tell you something personal without being prompted. These behaviors do not prove romantic attraction by themselves, but together they can reveal whether another person is actively participating in the connection. Understands. Research into romantic attraction has found evidence that reciprocity can influence attraction, although attraction itself is far more complicated than one psychological rule. Understands. People respond to the behavior of the specific person in front of them, and attraction develops through a mixture of individual preferences, interpersonal dynamics, circumstances, timing, and mutual experiences. This is why reciprocity should be understood as a signal rather than a formula. Understands. You cannot count how many messages someone sends and calculate their level of attraction. Human emotions are more complicated than that. The deeper lesson is to stop treating every interaction like a test you need to pass. When you are highly attracted to someone, it becomes tempting to analyze everything. Understands. You wonder whether you should send another message. You wonder whether they are waiting for you. You wonder whether their short response means something. You wonder whether you should try harder. Eventually, you can become so focused on interpreting their behavior that you stop noticing your own emotional experience. Understands. You may be giving far more than you are receiving, yet because you are hoping for a particular outcome, you keep moving forward. This is where self-awareness becomes essential. Ask yourself what the connection actually feels like. Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel listened to? Do you feel that your presence matters? Understands. Can you express yourself without constantly worrying about losing the person's interest? Do you feel like you are building something together, or are you carrying the entire emotional weight alone? These questions can reveal more than trying to decode individual messages. There is also a difference between patience and chasing. Understands. Sometimes someone genuinely likes you but has a demanding personality or a slower pace of emotional development. Giving a person room to develop feelings is healthy. Repeatedly pursuing someone who gives very little in return is something else. Patience respects the other person's pace, understands. Chasing tries to overcome their lack of participation. This distinction is especially important when someone gives mixed signals. A person may show affection one day and distance the next. They may enjoy emotional conversations but avoid making plans. They may flirt but never take meaningful steps toward building a relationship. Understands. Instead of focusing on the most exciting moment, pay attention to the pattern over time. Consistency provides more useful information than isolated bursts of attention. Sometimes the most difficult thing about reciprocity is accepting that you cannot create it by giving more. You cannot force curiosity by asking better questions. Understands. You cannot manufacture emotional investment by becoming more available. You cannot guarantee attraction by becoming more impressive. If someone is genuinely interested, their interest will eventually have some form of expression. It may be subtle, it may be slow, it may look different from what you expected. Understands. But there will usually be some movement toward you. And this is where the title of this video becomes deeper. The fastest way to create the possibility of love is not to convince someone that they should choose you. It is to create an environment where two people can discover whether they genuinely want each other. You show interest, they respond, understands. You open up, they open up, you make space, they make space, you remember them, they remember you, you make time, they make time. The connection becomes a shared experience instead of a personal campaign. When reciprocity is present, you no longer have to carry every interaction on your shoulders. You can relax into the connection, understands. You can enjoy discovering the other person without constantly wondering whether you are doing enough. Their actions begin giving you information. Their curiosity tells you something. Their effort tells you something. Their willingness to know you tells you something. Even their boundaries tell you something. Understands. And perhaps the most important shift happens inside you. You stop asking, how can I make this person fall in love with me? You start asking, are we creating something that both of us genuinely want? That question protects your dignity while keeping the door open to real intimacy. You are looking for connection, not convincing. Understands. You are looking for mutual desire, not one-sided effort. You are looking for a relationship where two people move toward each other freely. And beneath all of this lies an even deeper foundation, because reciprocity becomes much more meaningful when the person feels emotionally safe enough to be fully themselves around you. Understands. There is a deeper level of attraction that begins after the excitement of chemistry starts to settle. Someone may find you physically attractive, they may enjoy your conversations, they may feel that mysterious spark people often describe as chemistry, understands. Yet attraction can remain fragile when a person feels that they have to constantly protect themselves around you. They may enjoy being near you while still carefully choosing every word, hiding certain emotions, avoiding difficult subjects, or worrying about how you will react. Something can feel exciting and still fail to feel safe. Understands. Emotional safety is what allows attraction to move beyond excitement and become genuine intimacy. Emotional safety means a person can gradually become more of themselves around you without expecting constant judgment or punishment. They can have an opinion that differs from yours. They can say they need space. They can admit that something hurt them. Understands. They can tell you that they are confused. They can make a mistake. They can have a difficult day. They can express an emotion without immediately being told that their reaction is wrong. This does not mean you agree with everything they say or accept harmful behavior. It means there is enough emotional stability in the relationship for honesty to exist. Understands. This quality can be easy to overlook because dramatic relationships often receive more attention. Intense arguments can be mistaken for passion. Jealousy can be mistaken for caring. Constant texting can be mistaken for intimacy. Emotional highs and lows can feel addictive because they create strong reactions. Understands. Yet intensity and safety are very different experiences. A person can feel extremely attracted to someone while also feeling anxious around them. They can constantly think about someone while still feeling emotionally unsettled. Strong feelings alone do not tell you whether a connection is healthy. Understands. Emotional safety begins with how you respond when another person reveals something vulnerable. Suppose someone tells you about an insecurity they rarely discuss. You could laugh at them, dismiss the feeling, use it to gain power, or immediately tell them why they should feel differently. Or you could listen. You could ask questions. Understands. You could acknowledge that sharing something personal can be difficult. Your response teaches the other person something about what happens when they reveal their real self to you. Over time, these moments create a pattern. They learn whether openness leads to understanding or punishment. The same principle applies to boundaries. Understands. A person who feels emotionally safe around you does not have to fear that saying no will cause an emotional explosion. They can say, I need some time alone, without being accused of rejection. They can say, I am uncomfortable with that, without being pressured into changing their mind. Understands. They can maintain friendships, interests, routines, and personal guilty. Respecting boundaries communicates something powerful. You are allowed to remain yourself while being close to me. This can have a profound effect on intimacy because people reveal themselves gradually when they feel secure. Understands. At the beginning of a relationship, everyone has some level of self-protection. You do not know whether the other person will understand you. You do not know whether they will judge you. You do not know whether your vulnerability will later be used against you. So you reveal yourself in layers. You start with safer information. Understands. Then the other person's responses are you may reveal something deeper. Over time, trust develops through repeated experiences. This is why emotional safety cannot be created through one perfect conversation. It is built through patterns. You say you will call and you follow through. Understands. Someone tells you something personal and you treat it with respect. You disagree, but you remain respectful. They need space and you give it without creating a punishment. You make a mistake and you take responsibility. They make a mistake and you allow room for repair. Understands. Each experience becomes another piece of evidence about whether the relationship is emotionally safe. Also, a quiet power in allowing someone to be imperfect. People often spend enormous energy managing how others perceive them. They try to appear confident when they feel uncertain. They act happy when they are struggling. Understands. They hide their insecurities. They avoid admitting mistakes. They carefully edit their personality because they fear that the wrong version of themselves could cause rejection. When they encounter someone who does not demand perfection, their nervous system can gradually relax. They can stop performing. Understands. That relaxation can change the quality of attraction. Instead of wondering, how am I coming across, they can begin thinking, I can actually enjoy being here. Instead of monitoring every word, they can become playful. Instead of hiding their emotions, they can communicate them. Understands. Instead of trying to appear desirable, they can simply participate in the relationship. This creates a completely different emotional mix. Emotional safety also requires that you manage your own reactions. You cannot expect someone to open up if every uncomfortable conversation becomes a crisis. Understands. If their honesty triggers anger, silent treatment, threats, or emotional pressure, they learn to protect themselves by becoming less honest. Over time, the relationship may look peaceful on the surface while becoming emotionally distant underneath. The absence of conflict does not automatically mean the presence of safety. Understands. Sometimes people stop speaking because they have learned that speaking creates consequences they cannot handle. Healthy emotional safety allows disagreement to exist without destroying connection. Two people can see an issue differently and still respect one another. They can have difficult conversations without turning each other into enemies. Understands. They can say, I see this differently, without saying you are wrong for feeling that way. They can express disappointment without humiliation. They can ask for change without demanding control. This creates room for honesty because disagreement no longer automatically threatens the relationship. Understands. There is another important element. Emotional safety must work in both directions. You should feel safe too. A relationship where one person constantly provides emotional security while the other creates instability is not balanced. You deserve to communicate your needs. You deserve respect. You deserve boundaries. You deserve to be listened to. Understands. You deserve the freedom to remain an individual. Creating safety for someone else should never require you to tolerate disrespect or abandon your own emotional well-being. When someone can relax around you, they no longer have to spend all their energy protecting themselves. Understands. Their attention becomes available for curiosity, affection, humor, connection, and discovery. They can become interested in you rather than constantly analyzing your behavior. They can enjoy the present moment rather than preparing for the next emotional threat. That is where intimacy begins to feel different from simple attraction. Understands. And perhaps this is why emotional safety can become one of the most attractive qualities a person can offer. It does not create the loudest emotional reaction. It creates something quieter, a feeling of ease, a sense that you can breathe, a sense that you can speak without being immediately judged. Understands. A sense that closeness does not require surrendering your identity. Over time, that feeling can become deeply associated with your presence. The connection then becomes less about chasing emotional highs and more about creating a place where two people can genuinely exist together. Understands. There is room for desire, laughter, disagreement, vulnerability, independence, and affection. There is room for both people to be human. And when a person begins to experience that kind of emotional freedom with you, attraction can take on a deeper meaning because they are no longer simply drawn toward how you make them feel in exciting moments. Understands. They may begin to value how they feel when they are simply allowed to be themselves around you. The person who becomes unforgettable is rarely the person who spends every moment trying to become unforgettable. It sounds strange, but this is one of the most important shifts in understanding attraction. Understands. When someone is desperately trying to leave an impression, their attention often becomes focused on themselves. They are thinking about how they look, how they sound, whether the other person is impressed, whether they are being remembered, and whether they are getting the reaction they hoped for. Stands. Yet the people who stay in our minds often create a very different experience. They make us feel something. They make us feel understood. They make us laugh. They make us curious. They give us room to reveal something real. Their presence becomes connected with an emotional experience that feels different from ordinary interactions. Stands. Think about the people you remember from your own life. You may remember someone because they were exceptionally attractive, but physical appearance alone rarely explains why a person continues occupying your thoughts. You may remember someone because they made you laugh at a moment when you desperately needed it. Stands. You may remember someone because they listened to a story you had told before and somehow made you feel that it finally mattered. You may remember someone because they challenged an idea you had always accepted and encouraged you to think differently. You may remember someone because you felt unusually comfortable around them. Stands. The memory remains because the person became connected to a feeling. That is the difference between making an impression and creating an experience. An impression can be produced through performance. An experience develops through interaction. Stands. You can carefully prepare impressive stories, show off your accomplishments, or appear mysterious, but those things may fade quickly if the other person does not feel emotionally engaged. Meanwhile, a simple conversation can become memorable when something genuine happens between two people. A moment of laughter, a surprising confession, stands, an unexpected insight. A conversation that continues in your mind after it ends. Listening plays a major role in this process. When someone realizes that you remember what they told you, they begin to understand that your attention was real. You did not simply wait for your opportunity to speak. You noticed them. Understands. You remembered the details. You were interested in their experience. That can make an interaction feel unusually personal. In a world where people often divide their attention between conversations, screens, notifications, and endless distractions, genuine presence can stand out. Understanding goes even deeper. Understands. Listening means receiving what someone says. Understanding means trying to grasp what the experience means to them. Two people can hear the exact same story and respond completely differently. One person may immediately give advice, another may dismiss the emotion, a third may become curious and ask what the experience meant to the person who lived it. Understands. That third response can create a stronger emotional connection because it communicates that the person's inner world deserves attention. Vulnerability adds another layer. When someone allows you to see something they usually keep hidden, the relationship can become more meaningful. Perhaps they admit a fear, stands. Perhaps they reveal a dream they rarely discuss. Perhaps they tell you about a mistake that shaped them. If you respond with respect rather than judgment, they may associate you with the experience of being accepted while being real. Understands. That can become powerful because people often spend significant portions of their lives managing how they appear to others. Laughter can create another kind of emotional memory. When two people laugh together, they share an emotional moment that belongs to both of them. A private joke can later bring back an entire conversation. Stands. A ridiculous situation can become a story they tell again and again. These moments create a shared emotional language. The relationship begins developing memories that cannot be perfectly recreated with someone else because the circumstances belong to those two people. Healthy challenge can also make someone memorable. Stands. Being supportive does not mean agreeing with everything another person says. Sometimes the person who leaves the strongest impression is the one who respectfully challenges you. They may ask a question that makes you reconsider an assumption. They may encourage you to take yourself more seriously. They may point out a pattern you had never noticed. Understands. The important part is the intention. It does not humiliate or control. This connects with the idea of self-expansion discussed earlier. People can become emotionally significant when a relationship is associated with discovering new parts of themselves. Maybe you become more courageous around someone. Understands. Maybe you start exploring interests you had ignored. Maybe you learn to communicate differently. Maybe you begin seeing your own potential in a new way. The person becomes connected with the period in which your world became larger. There is also a fascinating balance between acceptance and independence. Understands. The person who makes you feel accepted can become deeply meaningful, but acceptance does not require dependence. In fact, healthy attraction becomes stronger when both people retain their individuality. You can make someone without making them responsible for your happiness. You can give affection without demanding constant reassurance. Understands. You can care deeply without turning the relationship into your entire identity. This creates a very different kind of emotional experience. The person feels appreciated while still feeling free. They can be close to you without feeling trapped. They can miss you without feeling pressured. Understands. They can enjoy your attention without becoming responsible for maintaining your emotional stability. They can see that you have your own interests, goals, friendships, and direction. You are inviting them into a meaningful part of your life, rather than asking them to become your entire life. Understands. That independence can also make interactions more interesting because you continue developing as an individual. You have experiences to share, you learn new things, you encounter challenges, you develop opinions, you grow. The other person gets to meet you again and again as you continue becoming yourself. Understands. The relationship does not have to carry the burden of creating your identity because your identity already exists. This is why demanding someone's attention rarely makes you unforgettable. Constant messages can create familiarity, but familiarity alone does not guarantee emotional significance. Understands. Repeatedly asking someone where they are, why they have not replied, or whether they still care can make the interaction feel like an obligation. The person may remember you, but the memory can become associated with pressure rather than warmth. There is a profound difference between being difficult to forget and being impossible to ignore. Understands. The first comes from emotional meaning. The second can come from constant intrusion. You do not want to occupy someone's thoughts because you created anxiety. You want to occupy their thoughts because something about the connection felt genuine and valuable. You want them to remember the conversation because it made them think. Understands. You want them to remember your presence because they felt comfortable. You want them to smile when they remember something you experienced together. The person who becomes unforgettable often leaves behind a feeling rather than a performance. They listened when it mattered. They noticed details. They allowed genuine vulnerability. Understands. They laughed without forcing it. They challenged without controlling. They accepted without becoming dependent. They had their own life, their own direction, and their own identity. They did not need to constantly demand attention because their presence already carried meaning. And this brings the entire idea of attraction into a deeper place. Understands. You do not become memorable by constantly trying to enter someone's mind. You become memorable when being around you creates an experience they genuinely value. The goal is not to make someone obsessed with you. The goal is to become someone with whom real connection feels rewarding, safe, interesting, and alive. Understands. When that happens, the memory of you can remain because it is attached to something much more powerful than clever words or calculated behavior. It is attached to how the person experienced themselves when they were with you. There is a moment when attraction can quietly turn into pressure. It usually begins with a simple desire. Understands. You like someone, you feel a strong connection, and you want them to feel the same way. That desire is completely human. But then the mind starts searching for control. You begin asking yourself, how can I make this person fall in love with me? You start analyzing every conversation, every message, every reaction, and every change in their behavior. Understands. You begin looking for the perfect words, the perfect timing, the perfect amount of tension, and the perfect amount of distance. Without realizing it, the relationship becomes less about discovering each other and more about trying to produce a specific result. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they become emotionally invested. Understands. They confuse attraction with strategy. Instead of experiencing the relationship as something two people are creating together, they begin treating it like a problem that needs to be solved. They believe that if they can find the right psychological technique, they can guarantee the right emotional response. Understands. Yet another person's feelings cannot be controlled like a machine. You can influence an interaction, you can create opportunities for connection, you can communicate your interest, you can become more emotionally aware, you can build trust. But the final decision belongs to both people. The desire for control often comes from fear. Understands. You may be afraid of rejection. You may be afraid that someone will lose interest. You may be afraid that another person will appear and become more attractive to them. You may be afraid that you are somehow inadequate. When those fears become strong, you start trying to manage everything. You check your messages repeatedly. You analyze their tone, their stance. You wonder whether you should respond immediately or wait. You think about whether you shared too much. You wonder whether you should pull away so they chase you. Every interaction becomes a calculation. That state of mind can make genuine connection difficult because your attention is constantly focused on the outcome. Understands. You are physically present, but mentally you are somewhere else. Instead of listening to what the person is saying, you are evaluating whether their words indicate attraction. Instead of enjoying a conversation, you are wondering whether you said enough to keep their interest. Understands. Instead of discovering who they are, you are searching for evidence that they want you. The relationship becomes emotionally exhausting because every moment is being measured against one question. Is this working? A healthier approach begins with curiosity. Understands. Instead of entering an interaction with the goal of making someone fall in love with you, enter it with the desire to discover who they actually are. What makes them laugh? What do they value? What experiences shape them? What kind of life are they trying to build? What makes them feel alive? What makes them feel safe? Understands. These questions shift your attention away from performance and toward genuine human connection. Authenticity becomes easier when you release the demand for a particular outcome. You can communicate what you genuinely feel without constructing an elaborate strategy around it. You can show interest without pretending to be indifferent. Understands. You can be warm without becoming dependent. You can express affection without demanding an immediate response. You can tell someone that you enjoyed spending time with them without turning their reaction into a measurement of your worth. Listening becomes part of that process. Understands. When you stop trying to control how someone sees you, you become more capable of seeing them clearly. You notice their personality rather than only their attraction toward you. You become interested in their actual experiences. You hear the things they say and the things they hesitate to say. You learn their boundaries, you discover their values. Understands. You begin to understand whether the two of you are genuinely compatible rather than simply trying to make yourself attractive enough to keep their attention. Sharing also matters. A healthy connection requires two people who are willing to reveal themselves gradually. You do not need to construct a perfect image. Understands. You can share your interests, experiences, hopes, fears, mistakes, and ambitions naturally. You allow another person to discover you rather than presenting a carefully engineered personality. This creates a much more honest foundation because the person is responding to who you actually are. Meaningful experiences can deepen that connection as well. Understands. Laugh together, explore something new, have conversations that challenge your thinking. Create memories. Allow the relationship to develop through real life rather than trying to manufacture emotional intensity. When two people experience genuine moments together, attraction has something real to grow around. Giving space is equally important. Understands. Space does not mean disappearing to create anxiety. It means allowing another person to have their own life. They can have responsibilities, friendships, interests, quiet time, and personal boundaries. You can have those things too. A healthy relationship does not require constant access. Understands. It allows two individuals to remain individuals while gradually becoming closer. Then comes reciprocity. Pay attention to whether the other person is participating. Do they ask about you? Do they initiate? Do they remember things you tell them? Do they make time for you? Do they reveal parts of themselves? Do they seem emotionally engaged? Understands. These questions are valuable because they help you observe reality rather than creating a fantasy around potential. You cannot build mutual intimacy by yourself. Accepting reality becomes one of the most mature forms of attraction. Sometimes you will like someone who does not feel the same way. Sometimes the timing will be wrong. Understands. Sometimes there will be chemistry without compatibility. Sometimes two good people simply will not develop romantic feelings for each other. That can hurt, but trying to overcome someone's lack of interest usually creates more pain for everyone involved. Respecting their feelings protects their freedom and your dignity. Understands. There is also freedom in accepting that you cannot control the outcome. You can stop trying to predict every reaction. You can stop treating every message as a clue. You can stop changing yourself to fit another person's preferences. You can stop believing that one perfect technique will guarantee love. Understands. Instead, you can focus on what is within your control. How you communicate, how you listen, how you treat people, how you maintain your boundaries, and how honestly you show up. This is where attraction becomes less about winning and more about discovering. You are discovering whether someone appreciates your personality, understands. You are discovering whether your values fit together. You are discovering whether communication feels natural. You are discovering whether both people can be vulnerable. You are discovering whether there is mutual effort. You are discovering whether the relationship gives both people room to grow. Understands. The healthiest form of attraction is invitation, not manipulation. An invitation says, "This is who I am. This is what I can offer. I enjoy being with you and I would like to know you more deeply." It leaves the other person free to respond honestly. Understands. Manipulation says, "Need to control your emotions so that you choose me." Those two approaches may look similar from the outside, but psychologically they are completely different. When you invite rather than manipulate, you create space for something far more meaningful than forced attraction. You create the possibility of mutual choice. Understands. You allow another person to come closer because they genuinely want to. You allow yourself to discover whether their presence is right for you as well. You are no longer chasing an outcome. You are participating in a relationship and paying attention to what grows naturally between you. Understands. And that shift changes the entire meaning of the original questions. Instead of asking how to make someone fall in love with you, you begin asking a deeper question. How can two people create the kind of connection where love has room to develop freely? Understands. The answer is found in curiosity, authenticity, attention, vulnerability, meaningful experiences, independence, emotional safety, and reciprocity. These qualities cannot guarantee love, but they can create something much more valuable. the conditions for a relationship that is chosen freely by two people who genuinely want to be there. Understands. The fastest way to make someone fall in love with you was never really about making them do anything. It was never about finding the perfect sentence, using the perfect psychological trick, creating jealousy, or learning how to control someone's emotions. Real connection works differently. Understands. It begins when you stop trying to force an outcome and start becoming someone with whom genuine connection can naturally happen. Make them feel seen. Listen when they speak. Remember the details they share. Become curious about the person beneath the surface. Let them discover who you are instead of presenting a carefully designed version of yourself. Understands. Share vulnerability gradually. Give them the opportunity to see your humanity without turning your openness into a strategy. Create experiences that bring laughter, curiosity, discovery, and growth into the relationship. Give the connection room to develop rather than demanding that it become something before it is ready. Understands. And remember the importance of emotional safety. People become closer when they feel respect and free to be themselves. Give someone space to have their own thoughts, boundaries, friendships, dreams, and life. Maintain your own identity as well. Love should add to who you are, rather than requiring you to disappear inside another person. Understands. Pay attention to reciprocity. You can show interest, but you should also allow the other person to show theirs. You can open the door, but they should have the freedom to walk through it. You can offer connection, but you cannot demand that someone accept it. Understands. This is where attraction becomes meaningful because genuine love is not something you extract from another person. It is something two people freely create together. And perhaps the most powerful part of all is this: give them the freedom to choose you. Understands. When someone chooses you freely, you no longer have to wonder whether their feelings were created by pressure, fear, manipulation, or some psychological technique. They chose to be there. They chose to know you. They chose to open up. They chose to invest their time, attention, and emotions in the relationship. Understands. That kind of love carries a completely different meaning. So instead of asking, how can I make this person fall in love with me? Ask yourself, how can I create a connection where both of us are free to discover something real? That question changes everything. It takes you away from chasing and toward understanding. Understands. Away from manipulation and toward authenticity. Away from proving your worth and toward sharing your life. Because the most powerful attraction does not come from making someone afraid to lose you. It comes from giving them an experience they genuinely value while remaining completely yourself. Understands. If this video gave you a new perspective on attraction, connection, and love, take a moment to like this video. Your support helps this channel reach more people who are searching for deeper psychological understanding. Understands. And if you want more videos about relationships, emotional patterns, human behavior, and healing, subscribe to our channel and become part of this growing community. Thank you for watching. And real love does not need to be forced. It needs room to grow.